and welcome to the PANDA, People Against the NDAA Bill Analysis of California's AB 351, which does nothing to protect the rights of the people of California. I'm Dan Johnson, founder and national director of PANDA, and I will show you exactly why this law does nothing to protect your inalienable rights. Firstly, unlike many organizations are reporting, California's AB 351 does not even attempt to prevent the federal government from implementing the NDAA. However, it attempts to stop California from assisting the federal government. While that may work in other instances, such as blocking effects of the Affordable Care Act passed by Congress and approved by the Supreme Court, since there is no such thing as a federal hospital. This does not work for something like indefinite detention without charge and without trial, which the federal government has plenty of resources to take care of by themselves without state help and without even notifying the state that they are doing so. So the bill doesn't even go as far as to block the NDAA. It stops short. It doesn't even attempt to go any farther than blocking California from assisting. So view everything I'm about to say through that lens. They're only blocking California from assisting, not blocking the federal government or any other government from actually enacting or using the detention provisions in the NDAA in California. Next, let's start reading through Assembly Bill 351 as passed and signed by Governor Brown. Section 1. Section 145.5 is added to the Penal Code to read 145.5.A1. Subject to paragraph 2. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, no agency of the state of California, no political subdivision of this state, no employee of an agency or political subdivision of this state, acting in his or her official capacity. This is the first loophole in California's AB 351. Because regardless of whether someone is acting in their official capacity or not, indefinite detention or engaging or assisting in an indefinite detention, indefinite military detention, is unconstitutional and wrong if you're doing it on a constitutionally protected person. And regardless of whether you're on the clock or not, it doesn't matter. So on official state duty allows the federal government to, say, take a California state employee out to lunch. And while they're out to lunch, say they're a systems administrator. While they're out to lunch, get information from them to assist them in violating a person's constitutional rights. That's a dangerous clause. Let's continue reading the bill. And no member of the California National Guard on official state duty, there you go again, on official state duty. It's wrong whether they're clocked in or clocked out. Let's continue reading. Shall knowingly. A prior court precedent has been for a long time. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. I'm sure many of you may have heard this with certain cases. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Yet we're giving here in Assembly Bill 351 state employees or political subdivisions, etc., in California a way out by saying they didn't know that there was a law against it, or they didn't know they were aiding an agency of the armed forces in an indefinite detention. Ignorance is no excuse, and to give them that excuse when they go into court is the same as giving a murderer or a suspected murderer the excuse of, well, you didn't know that bullet was actually going to kill them, so we're not going to charge you with murder. We're instead going to charge you with battery because that's what you were assault because that's what you were attempting to do. That is another dangerous clause in this bill. Let's continue reading. Knowingly aid an agency of the armed forces of the United States. It only specifies in AB 351 that the California political subdivisions, etc., cannot knowingly aid an agency of the armed forces of the United States, which inherently leaves out all other forces that could be used under the 2012 NDAA. Listen to Senator Lindsey Graham's victory speech as one of the proponents of the 2012 NDAA's detention provisions. Listen to his victory speech and what he says about which agencies will be able to use these powers under NDAA.
I'm very pleased for the men and women in uniform that Congress has come together in a bipartisan fashion to pass the Defense Authorization Bill. This bill has a pay raise for our military. It deals with our Wounded Warrior program. It has a lot of benefits for military families. It authorizes the equipment that our military needs to fight the war that we're in and the wars that we could be in the future. It allows detention in the law of war. We're no longer are we in the box of having to read Miranda rights to terrorists who come to America to kill us. We're giving authority to the American intelligence community, law enforcement community, and military to detain someone who gets to America and attacks us here at home to gather intelligence. This idea of requiring Miranda rights and providing a lawyer to a terrorist who makes it here to America to kill us all, I think undercuts our ability to be safe. If you can detain somebody overseas wanting to attack America and not provide them a lawyer or Miranda rights, you should be able to do it here, because this is the battlefield. America is the prize of the enemy.
The intelligence community, law enforcement, and the military. And he's right. The 2012 NDAA only requires the military to hold you in detention. It does not require that the U.S. Armed Forces actually detain you or go to take you out of your home. This loophole in AB 351 allows the state of California to assist the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Central Intelligence Agency, or even an international agency like Interpol, none of which are prohibited under the 2012 NDAA, since it leaves the door wide open for any agency to engage in those actions. It would allow the state of California to help them detain, execute, or torture one of their citizens unconstitutionally, or one of the people in California unconstitutionally. It's a very big loophole that could be exploited by simply not using the military to kidnap someone, and instead using the Federal Bureau of Investigation, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, or any other agency of the federal government. Going back to the bill. Aid an agency of the Armed Forces of the United States in any investigation, prosecution, or detention. Investigation, prosecution, or detention. The 2012 NDAA's detention provisions do not just allow for and authorize detention. They don't just authorize investigation or prosecution, both of which would probably very little happen, if any, were the 2012 NDAA actually to be used. The no trial, no charge, no lawyer part of it. However, the 2012 NDAA also includes the law of war, specifically, quote, pending disposition under the law of war. The law of war, as defined in the 2012 NDAA itself, includes, but is not limited to, under Section 1021C1, detention under the law of war without trial until the end of hostilities authorized by the Authorization for Use of Military Force, C2, trial under Chapter 47A of Title 10, U.S. Code, as amended by the Military Commissions Act 2009, essentially trial by a military commission. C3, transfer for trial by an alternative court or competent tribunal having lawful jurisdiction. Extremely vague language. They can transfer you to any court in direct violation of the Bill of Rights. C4, transfer to the custody or control of the person's country of origin, any foreign country, or any other foreign entity, otherwise known as rendition. Now note that the applications of the law of war, as I just mentioned, are not it. Section 1021C says the disposition under the law of war. The disposition of a person under the law of war, as described in subsection A, may include the following. It is not limited to what I just said. Yet California's AB 351 only prevents the state of California from aiding an agency of the armed forces of the United States in investigation, prosecution, or detention, leaving rendition, which being sent to a foreign country or foreign entity is bad enough. I would rather be indefinitely detained by the United States military, who may have some respect for me, than indefinitely detained by a foreign power, such as the Pakistani military or the Russian military. It leaves those loopholes out when it only talks about investigation, prosecution, or detention. Going back to the language of the bill. Investigation, prosecution, or detention of a person, which is good, I've seen other laws that say citizen, within California, pursuant to A, Sections 10.2.1 and 10.2.2 of the National Defense Authorization Act for Fiscal Year 2012, NDAA. B, the federal law known as the Authorization for Use of Military Force, Public Law 107-40, enacted in 2001. Or C, any other federal law, if the state agency, political subdivision, employee, or member of the California National Guard would violate the United States Constitution, the California Constitution, or any law of this state by providing that aid. If the state of California is not declaring the NDAA to be unconstitutional in their eyes, as their oath of office to the Constitution allows them to do, and actually requires them to do. If you look at the ruling in Marbury v. Madison, the foundation of constitutional law. As Chief Justice Marshall famously said in the majority opinion, quote, "Why does a judge swear to discharge his duties agreeably to the Constitution of the United States if that Constitution forms no rule for his government, if it is closed upon him, and cannot be inspected by him? It is worse than solemn mockery. To prescribe or take this oath becomes equally a crime." He's right, but it's not just judges that take an oath to the Constitution. It's legislators, it's peace officers. Any person who takes an oath to the Constitution must be able to determine the constitutionality of a law, either as an elected body, for themselves, or to take that oath becomes equally a crime. What if the Supreme Court decides something is constitutional that a peace officer believes is not? Does the peace officer then violate his oath by enforcing that law and believing it is unconstitutional? Absolutely not. This clause in AB 351, in refusing to declare the 2012 NDAA detention provisions and those powers themselves unconstitutional, is not only leaving a large loophole, but abdicating the duty of its state legislature to do so. The text gets even better. 2. Paragraph 1 does not apply to participation by state or local law enforcement or the California National Guard in a joint task force, partnership, or other similar cooperative agreement with federal law enforcement if that joint task force, partnership, or similar cooperative agreement, now listen closely here, is not for the purpose of investigating, prosecuting, or detaining any person pursuant to A, Sections 10.2.1 and 10.2.2 of the NDAA, B, the federal law known as Authorization for Use of Military Force, to Public Law 107-40, enacted in 2001, or C, any other federal law, if the state agency, political subdivision, employee, or member of the California National Guard would violate the United States Constitution, the California Constitution, or any law of this state by providing that aid. We've already talked about the if. We spent a lot of time on that. We've already noted the 10.2.1, 10.2.2 of NDAA, AUMF, and any other federal law. That is a good part of this law. However, if you listen carefully or read this bill carefully, you'll note that this paragraph essentially removes any possible power the previous paragraph could have had. Why? Listen very carefully. Joint task force, partnership, or other similar cooperative agreement with federal law enforcement, if that joint task force, partnership, or other similar cooperative agreement is not for the purpose of essentially enacting the detention provisions of NDAA. If a task force is formed as a drug task force between the Drug Enforcement Administration and the State Bureau of Investigation in California, and then is used to detain someone under the NDAA, that's okay, because it was not formed, it is not for the purpose, and the cooperative agreement is not for the purpose of investigating, prosecuting, or detaining any person, but it can be used for that. As long as they didn't form the task force to detain you, which if there are any NDAA detention task forces, we would not know about them, and even if we did, I would find it shocking that they existed or would ever be used. They will take an existing task force created and a cooperative agreement already created and utilize that task force to implement the NDAA detention provisions instead of creating a new task force just to detain someone. That makes the entire above paragraph, even if it was perfect, makes everything in the entire above paragraph a moot point. Because the task force was not formed for the purpose, and the state aid was not formed for the purpose of detaining someone under NDAA, but they'll do it anyway. Going to the final paragraph of California's Assembly Bill 351. B. Is the policy of this state to refuse to provide material support for or to participate in any way with the implementation within this state of any federal law that purports to authorize indefinite detention of a person within California, notwithstanding any other law, no local law enforcement agency or local municipal government, or the employee of that agency or government acting in his or her official capacity, just talked about that, shall knowingly, again, use state funds or funds allocated by the state to local entities on or after January 1st, 2013, in whole or in part, to engage in any activity that aids an agency of the armed forces of the United States, there you go again, in the detention. This is interesting. Above they have investigation, prosecution, or detention. Yet here they only have detention. Therefore, under California's law, even though investigation, prosecution, or detention has loopholes in itself, under California's law, the state agencies may not assist the federal government in investigation, prosecutions, or detentions, but they can help the federal government investigate or prosecute someone under the 2012 NDAA or the authorization to use military force, those powers within those laws. Let's go back to the text. In the detention of any person within California for purposes of implementing sections 10.2.1 and 10.2.2 of the NDAA, or the federal law known as the Authorization for Use of Military Force, Public Law 10740, enacted in 2001, if that activity would violate the United States Constitution, the California Constitution, or any law of this state. Again, very interesting. No longer is it any federal law. Now it's just sections 10.2.1 and 10.2.2 of the NDAA, or the federal law known as Authorization for Use of Military Force. It's no longer any federal law. So the state of California seems a little bit more lenient about funding your indefinite military detention or possible execution under the law of war. But it's not okay with actually providing enforcement or assistance to the implementation of these laws. So today, the state of California does not want to have people with the state of California's seal or approval out on the streets helping, because that would be visible. That would look like they were actually assisting the federal government in implementing this law. But if they just fund it, you can't tell, at least outwardly. I'm starting to call AB 351 the Pontius Pilate Act, washing their hands of assisting in violating your rights, but doing nothing to protect them. Now, why are laws like this so dangerous? Why would I come out so strongly against a law like AB 351? Isn't it a step in the right direction? Actually, it's not. When a law is passed that does not fix the problem, yet is trumpeted from the rooftops as something that actually does fix the problem, as Assemblyman Tim Donnelly and sponsor of AB 351 said recently, quote, AB 351 will prevent California from implementing indefinite detention for any reason, close quote. The activists, the groups, the regular citizens who may have not gotten involved in activism before, sit down. They go back to their couch. They go back to their daily lives, believing the fight was won. What's a perfect example? Virginia. House Bill 1160 passed early last year as the first state to block, quote-unquote, the NDAA and prohibit indefinite detention in their state. The bill was full of loopholes, and it was the state wiping its hands clean of engaging in actual indefinite detention, just letting the federal government take care of it themselves. There has not since been a stronger bill introduced in Virginia. There has not since been a serious attempt, even by the sponsor of that bill, Delegate Bob Marshall, to prohibit the federal government from actually implementing the NDAA. It was not a step in the right direction. It was a step that killed the movement in that state. Same all across the country, where bills that do not fix the problem are cheered on as if they do, and the people sit down. People of California, don't sit down. This is a chance for you to rise and take your state back, and take back your towns. This is a chance for you to restore constitutional governance, liberty, and justice in the state of California. Just remember the mistakes of Assembly Bill 351. Remember the loopholes they left for the federal government to still engage in NDAA detention. And remember the political game that your representatives are playing with you and will continue to play with you at the state, the local, at the county, and at every level of government you attempt to engage in. However, if you take this bill as a lesson and as inspiration that the people of this country will stand up and will say enough, then you can take real legislation to your county, to your city, and to places in your state to stop the NDAA and the powers within for good, not just wipe their hands clean of engaging with those powers. I recommend the Restoring Constitutional Governance Act. We spent thousands of hours putting that together. Read that bill. Look it over. Find and see if there are any loopholes. I guarantee you there are not, and if there are, we'll fix them, we'll walk you through, we'll explain them, and we'll provide the support you need to take back your town. This has been a PANDA, People Against the NDAA Bill Analysis of California's Assembly Bill 351. If you have any questions, you can reach us at pandaunite.org or email us at info@pandaunite.org. We'd be happy to answer any further inquiries or provide further information and documentation on our analysis of this piece of legislation. Thank you for listening. It's time to restore liberty, constitutional governance, and justice in the United States of America.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.